Welcome everyone to Monday Match Analysis. I'm Gill Gross, really pumped for today's episode. We're going to talk to Mike Cation. Mike Cation is a guy who is almost always ahead of the curve on any player who scales the ranks of the Challenger Tour, as Wu Yibing did last year. And last week, he wins the Dallas Open. He becomes the first Chinese man to ever win an ATP title. Whatever he does from now on, just basically assume he's the first Chinese man to ever do it. But Wu, with his unique story, a game that's rather scintillating, he was the story of last week, and no one better to talk about Wu Yibing than Mike. Also, some other guys who have kind of been notable, who Mike has recently seen on the Challenger Tour or called matches on the Challenger Tour, like Arthur Fils and Ben Shelton, which we'll get into. Really busy week, though. Some other stuff to also hit on. So I will do that quickly before the conversation with Mike Cation. Let's start with Jannik Sinner. Montpellier wins the title there. Moves up 3 spots in the rankings. I think it goes back to Sinner and what was different about last year. Because last year, Sinner dropped out of the top 10, 4 or 5 ranking spots. Was 17 in the world coming into last week, off of his career high of number 9. So on paper, he regressed, but it didn't feel like he regressed. And it was a source of mass confusion. Why is Sinner 17 in the world? I just want to reiterate the point. The reason why he was 17 in the world and why it didn't feel like it is because last year he wasn't winning Montpellier. And that's why his ranking dropped. It didn't feel like Sinner regressed because at the majors, he actually improved. He had a better year at the majors in 2022 than he did in 2021. So that's why it felt like, well, Sinner got better. But no, the big difference was in 2021, Jannik won 4 titles, 3 250s and a 500. In 2022, he won UMAG. That was his only title. He wasn't taking home your Montpelliers of the world. So to me, this is just Sinner back on the upward trajectory. And he's going to get there soon. He's up to 14 now, so he moved up 3 spots off the Montpellier title. He was the only player all week to break the serve of Maxime Cressy, who he beat in the final. He played a nearly perfect tiebreak in the first set after Cressy opened with a double fault. I thought that was really, really impressive. And then in the second set at 3-all, that's when I think it was 3-4 actually, that's when he broke Cressy's serve. And again, nobody had done that to Cressy all tournament long. Confident serve and volley, 2 first serves, indoor, hard court, pretty speedy. A lot to deal with. Tough to break that serve. Jannik was the only guy to do that. He still has one of my favorite returns of serve on tour. Just does a really nice job of driving the return when he's on the stretch, where a lot of guys, especially on the two-hander, where you theoretically can lack a little bit of reach. A lot of two-handed backhands, especially when they're stretched out on the backhand, they take that left hand off the racket quite easily. And against Cressy, when he's coming in, man, if you're blocking the return, you're giving him too much time and to kind of close the net and hit a good first volley. So Sinner just does a really good job stretched out on both the backhand and the forehand of still getting some pace on the return, still keeping the return low at times. And he was making good returns right down the middle against Cressy, which was a very effective tactic. Just not allowing him any real angle on that first volley. So good straight set win for Sinner. He is back on the way up after winning Montpellier. Baez goes from 0 to 100. Sebastian Baez was in a horrific slump, I should say. He had lost 16 of his last 17 matches coming into last week. It all dates back to the Båstad final. He actually picked up the biggest win of his career in Båstad over Andrei Rublev to make the final, lost that final to Cerundolo, who was on fire that week. But that was his 3rd clay court final of the season. And I'm pretty sure after that week, I think I had Nico Pereira on this show, and we were like singing Baez's praises. I was all excited about him because it's an electrifying style of tennis that he plays. And for his age and what he did on the Challenger circuit in 2021, it really felt like he was on his way. And then again, he couldn't win a match after that. He really couldn't. 16 of 17. So then the question was like, all right, what's going on with this Baez slump? The obvious transition was there was no more clay courts. Bostad's that was the last clay court week of the year. You had those 3 weeks of clay court tennis after Wimbledon, and then it's kaput on the clay, tour level, right? That's the main thing that changed. Do I think he had some injuries? Yes. Do I think that there was an existential crisis of confidence that went beyond what surface he was playing on? Yes. But at the end of the day, let's not ignore what's happened here. We're back on the clay. And now he wins another title. So this has to be pretty mental for Baez. But his current splits, hard court versus clay court, are absolutely absurd. He's 26 and 15 on clay. He's 5 and 21 on hard court. So the difference in win percentage there. Clay, 63%. Hard court, 19%. It's an insane disparity. So huge for him, ultimately, to break out of the slump. It doesn't matter that he did it on clay. He just needed to win some matches, and he did it. Didn't have to face a top 50 player, must be said, but it's a huge title for him regardless. Glad to see him back on the right track, winning some tennis matches. Lastly, Wu Yibing beats John Isner, maiden title at the Dallas Open. Perhaps the even more victory came in the semifinal. Beat Taylor Fritz. Couple of words on this before we talk to Mike. This match turned into the best of 3 tie-break sets version of Isner-Mahut. Much better, much more entertaining than Isner-Mahut. Less novel, but in terms of like the drama, how gripping it was, the quality, much better. But in terms of best of 3 tie-break sets, this is pretty much Isner-Mahut in this match. And it's incredibly impressive for Wu to come away out of that situation with the title. Because John, throughout his career, has proven that that's his sweet spot. Like, that's how he wins. That's what he does. That's the John Isner. 492 tie breaks won in Isner's career. That's the most of all time. 61 of those tie breaks are deciding set tie breaks. That's the most of all time. After the first set against Wu, where he won a tie break, he was 6-0 in tie breaks at the Dallas Open. Win percentage, all time in tie breaks, Isner, 61%, 61.12 to be exact. That's 12th all time. 12th all time in tiebreak win percentage. If you look at the list, the names above Isner, at least 8 Hall of Famers. Some guys who might be in at some point, like a Zverev is above him actually, which I was surprised to see. But 12th all time in tiebreak win percentage, 8 Hall of Famers above him. Basically, you get John into a tiebreak, and a deciding set tiebreak especially, and you're in his element. You were in his zone here. His territory. Dallas. That's where he lives. That's where John Isner lives. Woo. Never been in a tour final. Like, situationally, he was supposed to lose. And he played awesome. And let's also cover, I guess, kind of why John is so successful in these tiebreaks. And there's no, super complicated or surprising answer here, but the serve that John Isner possesses is a pressure-averse weapon. It doesn't matter what the scoreboard says or how tight he should theoretically be. The nerves just don't come out in the serve. And as an offensive weapon, that's a huge superpower because generally speaking, and statistically, there have been studies that literally back this up. Offensively, players are worse under pressure. They hit less aces. They hit less winners. That's what nerves and tightness, that's what it does. It takes away your aggression. And John, with his serve, gets to combat that in a way that not only limits opportunities for him to make mistakes, right? If he only has to swing the racket once and it's his serve, there's no chance for him to get tight and make an unforced error off the ground. Let that tightness kind of seep in to the points where he's on serve, the important points that he needs to win. It also amplifies his opponent's nerves on their serve. I mean, just mentally, this dynamic is a huge advantage for Isner. And if you're playing John, you have to be as reliable dictating against him off the ground behind your serve. You need to be as reliable in doing that as John is at serving. And that's hard. Like, we get that Isner doesn't move well. We get that Isner doesn't return that well. We get that you should be able to take care of your serve against Isner. Yeah, but to do that under pressure without error, when it's 7-all in the tiebreak, and now it's 8-all in the tiebreak, and now it's 9-all in the tiebreak, and John is making balls. Like, you have to execute and win these rallies. Whereas, I mean, Isner, with his serve and his early aggression, he's just having to do less. He's hitting serves. He's not having to execute too many balls behind his serve because that's just how he plays. So for Wu to dictate as reliably as Isner served, and by the way, served very, very well in the tiebreak, is unbelievably impressive. Wu Yibing wins the tiebreak 14-12, saves 3 championship points in the tiebreak, 4 in the match. I think the one that John would have really wanted back was the one in the second set where he had to look at a second serve return that he just slightly mishit enough for Wu to get into the rally. Ultimately, Wu Yibing wins 2 consecutive tiebreaks against John Isner, wins his maiden title. And there's probably plenty more ahead for Wu Yibing. That's what we want to talk about and break down with Mike Cation. We're joined once again by Mike Cation, broadcaster, the USTA Pro Circuit, Australian Open, US Open, and a Wu Yibing aficionado. Mike, you were on a broadcast last week of an exhibition from Dallas for Tennis One, I believe, and you predicted Wu Yibing to win the Dallas Open title.
I feel like I've got my pick already in my head. I'm set. I know who it is.
You're talking about pick to win the whole event.
The whole event.
Okay.
I don't even need to fill everything out.
Okay.
It's Wu Yibing. Guy's going to win it all.
Now, I am going to deem that, anoint that, if you will, the best prediction we've ever seen in the history of tennis media.
Wow.
Why did you predict Wu Yibing to win the Dallas Open?
Thanks for having me, Gill. It's great to be back with you. As always, I really enjoy getting to watch your videos and always being a part of it as well. So I appreciate that invite. I saw him play indoors last year in Rome and Indianapolis, both events that he won last year on the challenger level. And his ability to be as clean as he is off of the ground in a controlled environment made me know and be very confident that in an indoor setting, he's going to be great. And that's obviously shown through, right? When I saw the draw come out and I saw, obviously I think it was Michael Moe first round. And I was just like, okay, that can be tricky. Mike's obviously pretty comfortable as well. Gets past that though. He gets Shapovalov, and that's a matchup that I felt really comfortable with because I'm just like, okay, Shapo can have those days, right? Where 18 errors going every single way. He can obviously play incredibly well. We know that. But it just felt like one of those matchups where I thought that Wu was going to be a little bit more in control offensively, and Shapo with his defensive issues, that was going to be a real good matchup. And then I just found myself thinking, well, why not? I don't think anybody yet took him seriously and thought of him as a real threat. And as you know, Gil, from being around the sport so long, people will say all the time, every single player will say, I take all these players seriously. I know that that level at the challengers is so good, you know, and just go through the motions of saying, yeah, I think he's great. But when somebody's 98 in the world, you don't always have that same, you know, you're maybe in 95% versus 100%. And he is a guy who's going to be seated at the Grand Slams very, very soon. I know that that level is there. Obviously we saw it in the semifinal, right? That was a pretty incredible matchup with Taylor.
Yeah.
Some of the ball striking there was just phenomenally good. And I thought that was going to be the one matchup that, like, if he lost to Taylor Fritz and, you know, my prediction doesn't come true, so be it. That's a tough matchup against a guy who's what, now 7 in the world. So that was the lone one I was really concerned about, but I just found myself thinking, yeah, this guy's world class. He's top 20 player if he stays healthy. And why not pick him? Because it's, you know, nowadays in media, if you get a prediction wrong, it's gone by the wayside in about 2 days anyways, but I'm happy this one turned out correct.
For the record, Mike, I did decide to have you on before I actually knew that you had predicted that. So it wasn't just because of the prediction. I don't think of it, but I was also very impressed that you went on the air to say. So congratulations. I did make him a dark horse for the Australian Open. Didn't quite work out, but I saw what he did. I mean, let's talk about it. Last year, he wins 3 challenger titles in a row. You have a front row seat for that. What are your lasting memories of that title run? And I know you love the storytelling aspect as well of this stuff. And Wu Yibing's an amazing story.
Well, I think I did an interview with him, I believe it was after Indianapolis, where he beat Alex Kovacevic, who actually beat him a week ago, right, in Cleveland. But he beat Alex Kovacevic and fought off, I think it was 7 match points in the final there. And we just kind of had one of those 10-minute, very relaxed conversations where he just told me a little bit about how he wouldn't have had the success he was having without that injury layoff that he had, the 3 years, obviously the back issue, on top of it, obviously COVID and China, that complication. But he was so mature, especially considering all of that time off. And I think that was what really stuck with me, was that he didn't seem like an entitled young man. Obviously the US Open junior success would kind of lead to that. He didn't seem overwhelmed by it either. At the same time, it felt very mature and balanced. And I'm struck with that. And that's kind of that lasting memory, was that he never had any moment of panic, never had any moment where he didn't look comfortable, even when he was trailing at times. And I just was so impressed with that, because you know, Gill, when you're around athletes like that, that's special. When there's no fear at any time, there's just this even-headed thing, you know, throughout an entire match, throughout an entire week. And it's truly unique and special. And for him to show me that during that 3-week stretch was really impressive. And I think that's going to be such a lasting characteristic for him. And as he said, it wouldn't have happened for him if he'd just gone straight into the pros. And to kind of expand on that, Gill, I've been thinking a lot about him and also Ben Shelton, you know, and kind of, they actually became friends after those couple of weeks indoors, which was really cool. Obviously 2 guys from very different backgrounds, and, you know, Wu with his success as a junior, Shelton barely playing anything as a junior. But what I think both of them had, for various different reasons, was just kind of a different experience over the last few years. Shelton obviously playing baseball and football for a much longer time than a lot of other kids who specialize early. Wu having that ability to be away from the sport in a way for a couple of years. I think that actually provided both of them just a little bit better perspective and maturity. Which, in terms of, and this is maybe you know, you and I chatting for an hour here about whether we should be, you know, putting kids at 10, 12 into those grind sessions, you know, in going for a gold ball. I don't know if that's necessarily the thing, but Ben and Yibing both just have this, you know, different maturity that their experience, you shouldn't have it. You shouldn't have that level of maturity with such little experience at the highest level. So that's really what I'm going to have as my lasting memory of Yibing in that particular stretch.
It was a very unique interview, and I'll plug your podcast here, Behind the Racket, which you do with Noah Rubin. That particular interview was just yourself, and it went up on the feed, and that was the first time I had heard him. Mm-hmm. And yeah, he was very honest. He was very tired after that final with Kovacevic. That's fascinating though. So the 3-year layoff, did not play internationally for 3 years.
Right.
You think that refreshed him mentally to a point where he was ready to fulfill his potential once he came back?
I think if he'd have played, he would be successful. He will be successful no matter what, injuries being the one, thing, the caveat we have to throw out there. But yeah, I think, what he did last year, 37-7, 4 challenger titles, so many of, I think it was 4 or 5 of those 7 losses coming by way of injury. I don't know that would have been possible for him in the first couple of years out of, right out of juniors. I think he would be the first to admit that as well, that there's, you come in as a junior champion and start playing some challengers. There are going to be a lot of those old veterans who want to knock you off because you're an arrogant little jerk, right? I mean, that happens all the time. I see it every single year at doing the USTA Pro Circuit Challenger events. He didn't have that type of attitude. He was very much just like, I'm going to go out, perform the way I can perform. I'm going to take care of my body afterwards, something that 18-year-olds just don't do. And yeah, it felt like I was watching a 27-year-old man play tennis, and that was clearly not the case.
There's also a lot of talent there. Let's talk through his game. You mentioned the cleanliness of the hitting indoors, the aggression. I mean, to me, I see a couple of things. One, a level of timing on the return where he's able to take the ball early and still drive the ball. His backhand is nearly just as offensive as his forehand, which is not the case for most players. And the quickness is certainly there. Those are the big 3 things that stand out for me.
Gill, you hit the nail on the head with that. Specifically, the returning is the one that I thought, I actually put a tweet out and I went back and looked at it. I said, when I watched him play, I think it was Orlando last year. I think that's right. But I said he's a top 5 returner. Like this is top 5 returner in the world right now. His ability, the hand-eye coordination that's necessary to be able to do that, as you said, taking it early, and it looked effortless. It's just like, I don't know, if he just had the matches underneath him, he'd be top 50 right then and there. But you hit it exactly right. That's the thing. His ability to just take it, see it that cleanly is something that can't be taught, right? That hand-eye coordination is the gift from God, whatever belief system you have. That's the one you can't teach. But yeah, his ability to take things offensively and his ability to inject pace is phenomenal. You'll be in the midst of just a normal rally, and then all of a sudden, just that arm, and as loose as it is, just taking and throwing in an extra couple miles per hour, especially off that forehand wing. That is, again, something that's incredibly special. That does lead me to the one big question mark that I just mentioned, is the injuries. I mean, let's listen, the back was the one that caused the initial problems and really set him back, along with COVID, to miss the 3 years. But you'll see that sleeve that's on that right arm. And right afterwards, I noticed it as well. The first thing he did is he took off that sleeve, was rub that right elbow. I think that's going to be the real question mark. I know last year when he was traveling in some of the smaller hotels that we are at some of the challengers, he had multiple rooms because he was also, even at that level, he had a physio that was with him day in, day out to make sure that body is strong. And I think that is my real concern for him, is how is that body going to hold up?
Okay. Thank you for getting ahead of that kind of line of questioning. That's what we do. We both, when we both do this, the health, what about indoors, outdoors? Okay. I just want to, because I always have my antennas up with runs like this, whether it be Felix last year winning 3 titles in a row in the fall and then coming into the Australian Open. Is he a top 5 contender, or was that because of the roof? Where do you see that playing out for Wu Yibing?
Yeah, no, that's a legitimate question. And I think that's going to also be a real issue. I saw him win the title in Orlando with good quality wins. It was over Chris Eubanks. Emilio Gomez, and Jason Kubler. That's three obviously pretty solid top 100 names, although Chris Eubanks needs one or two wins this week to get 100. Not that I keep track of those kind of things for reasons, but yeah, I mean, he had a win over Jordan Thompson in Zagreb last year. Competitive with Jason Kubler in Zagreb on the clay as well. I think it's one of those questions that we can't really. I didn't even mention the U.S. Open. Obviously, beating Nuno Borges. Obviously lost in straight sets to Daniil Medvedev, but I think he's a guy who's going to his footwork adjustment ability. You mentioned the speed, right? But on top of it, just to get to the right spot. Again, something we won't really know until we see it at the highest levels. There might be some adjustments, especially on the clay, see how he does with that. I think that is completely fair. I believe very much, though, Gill, like you said, I believe in that footwork. I believe in the speed ability and the adjustment ability. We've seen that indoors. I think that will translate very well outdoors as well, because a lot of times with an indoor player who's able to do that a lot is just the serve and getting to the first forehand, right? There's a lot more components into his game. We certainly have seen that this week. The ball striking against Fritz in particular, his ability to control points and really construct them. I don't have as many concerns about that. So I think it's just about the footwork more than anything else.
Excellent point. What about the star power? Am I reading this correctly? Because it feels like game style, check. Very entertaining, very infectious. Personality, he's got a sense of humor on him, check.
Yes.
The unique background, which, hey, that's a big deal when it comes to who's going to be a star. When you look at a Naomi Osaka of the world, or I guess the best comparison here, Li Na was an enormous global superstar. This guy has a lot of potential. And by the way, feel free to bring in Jerry Shang into this conversation for this question.
Yeah, I'm Jerry. He's an interesting guy, and I'll get to that in a second. But you're exactly right. Li Na is obviously the easy comparison. But yeah, we really haven't seen a Chinese male tennis star to have that kind of an impact, right? I think financially, he is going to, within the next couple of months, have contracts that are going to set him, his family up for generations. That is set. Yeah, his comedy is dry. He is very much, you and I have an age difference, Gill, but he's very much more in your generation. He's tech savvy. He's a gamer. I actually sent Blair Henley, who was doing the on-court MCs. I said, hey, listen, he just got a brand new computer. I know he's gaming a lot right now. You might want to ask him about that. He's very dry and personable. And yeah, the fact that he has already, like, very quickly, the interactions with Ben Shelton, some of those guys, there's no issue with the language barrier at all. A lot of time spent in Florida. Sky's the limit. You and I are always kind of, I think both of us kind of say this is, you can put him in that discussion for Grand Slam potential, Gill. I think that's the kind of way I like to look at it, at least. Do I think he will? I think he's got a good shot. I think that's a possibility for him. If that happens, that is multi-billion dollars in terms of the fact that the Chinese have always been looking for that male superstar in this particular sport and have invested obviously so much into it. Guy could make literally billions of dollars over the next couple of years if he is able to achieve on the tennis court what we think is possibly there. Jerry. I have a couple more questions about Jerry right now than I do about Yibing. And that is solely because of the fact that physically he's not there yet. Same kind of idea, right? That ball striking is, come on. We all know top 100, top 75, top 50. I have more concerns about Jerry strictly because of his size. That's it. I think that is a completely, that's not saying anything about his talent level at all, Gill. It's just much more about can his body hold up the rigors of going and doing it 30, 35 weeks a year? He's 17. He has another 3, 4, 5, 6 years of growth in front of him with that body. if that question is answered, I think the same kind of possibility is there for him with his ability, the lefty as well. You add that component in. I think there's a lot of upside for Jerry. I just want to make sure that the body is kind of that first point for him.
Yeah, very fair. And the height has certainly come into play on his serve early in his career. For those who don't know, Jerry Shang, world number 165 currently, also from China. That's kind of why he's folded into this conversation, because there's just little to zero tradition out of that country of male players who are as good as Jerry Shang and Wu Yibing. So we will see what the future holds for them.
Jerry is also incredibly personable, though.
Okay.
I happened to sit next to him on I couldn't even tell. I think it was Charlottesville, last year, but we were on the same flight. We were in the same row, and he just kind of sat and talked to me for a while through, like it was one of those very tiny planes, and we're just across the aisle from each other and just having a conversation the entire time. He loves tennis. He's also very interested in the business side, and he's same thing, very social media active. So he kind of gets all the memes and things that are so necessary to be really fluent today in American culture. Same type of thing though, Gill. If the tennis comes again, he's going to be financially set for generations.
It's great for the sport. It is. All right, I got to ask you about two other guys, and then I'm going to let you go. Shelton, you mentioned him. Would you like to make an argument? I'm not ordering you to make an argument. I'm asking you if you would like to make an argument for Ben Shelton to finish this year in the top 10. It's there if you want it.
Wow. Wow, Gill, that puts me on the spot.
Would you like to? Do you want me to? Should I soften it?
Go ahead.
Okay. Would you like to make an argument that Ben Shelton finishes top 20?
I don't know that anybody honestly, Gill. There are going to be people who watch this, and I know the YouTube comments are going to be bad about me copping out here. We don't know what he looks like on clay. We don't know what he looks like on grass. I have no idea what the hell's going to happen come April. Literally no idea. And like there is 3.5 months that I'm just like, I have no idea what he's going to do. I think there's enough time here with Miami and Indian Wells specifically. You and I both know, being there, having those opportunities, he has no fear. Much like Yibing, they're gamers, right? Like Ben has so many deficiencies in his game right now, and I don't mean that as to criticize, but it's just like that's what people see is that potential, right? Like the backhand's still not a weapon at all, still not comfortable moving forward. Big steps are in front of him, but he shows up in the big moments. So I think it's possible that he will get to top 20. I think that is very much a realistic goal. I don't know what that 4 months in the summer, I have no flipping idea what will happen from April 1st until middle of July when Wimbledon finishes. No freaking idea. I'm thrilled to watch it, and I will be watching that first match on clay with great intent.
Yeah, and I mean, again, this is a guy who has he ever played on red clay? I mean, likely not.
Just in practice sessions in Orlando. That's it.
Okay. So, yeah, this is what we're talking about. Like, for those who don't know, Ben Shelton, he was not someone as a junior who was traveling internationally, getting on planes, flying to Europe and playing on red clay. So that is the question mark. I actually think there's a lot in his game that would be suitable for red clay. He's got a nasty kick serve, huge forehand.
I fully agree with you, Gill. I also think you put that serve on the grass.
Yeah.
Like, good God. Like, I mean, it would be untouchable at times.
Yeah.
I don't know what happens if he comes up against somebody who's going to put a lot of balls back in play on grass. Is he going to be able to find that first forehand the way he wants to? Is he going to be patient enough on clay because he doesn't have match experience? As you know, that is going to be so important. That's what makes me question it, is not big picture 5-10 years. You and I agree. There are a lot of weapons on both of those surfaces that'll translate very well. But the first time, no idea what the hell's going to happen.
Absolutely, absolutely. And by the way, I am worried a little bit about the backhand just with how long it takes to produce it. Pro level, ball comes quicker.
Yep.
In college, it was going to be fine, but I think that's also going to be something that will be shored up in the next couple of years.
Fully agree.
Arthur Fils made a tour level semifinal last week. He's pretty electric. I hate to make this too much about where he's from, but French tennis,
Yes.
it really had it had quite the era, and I think everybody will be able to understand this pretty well because everybody knows exactly how Tsonga, Simone, Monfils, and Gasquet play tennis. Does Fils remind you of any of those four players?
Yeah, listen, I didn't get to watch as much last week. Unfortunately, that was just it just didn't work with my schedule being here at home and parenting properly. Gill, I try to do the best I can with that. But I remember he actually played with us in Savannah last year, and yeah, listen, I think Tsonga was the one that just immediately struck a chord with me just in terms of that incredible power that he's able to bring. And I immediately was just like, okay, I see some of that. But yeah, you saw a flair that reminds you of Monfils, right? That just obviously the name as well doesn't hurt. But yeah, the combination of those guys. But what did strike me is I felt that there was, I felt there was that level of professionalism early. With him that week, because if I remember right, he either lost first or second round, Gill, and at a challenger in Savannah, Georgia, and I just found myself thinking, yeah, he's gonna have some moments. It's gonna be a matter it seems like he's putting in the work week in, week out. I actually, I kind of, this is harsh, but I kind of want him to kind of let those four be those four. Incredible success that they had, and it's unfair that we say, well, yeah, they didn't win a Grand Slam, none of them did, but that's how we are in the media, we're jerks. But I hope I think he has much more of that ability of being just that rock solid professional with that entertainment flair. I mean, listen, Nick Kyrgios is somebody who I actually think maybe that's a little bit more of who he could play like. He has that athleticism to be as good of a ball striker with that kind of power and pace and that flair. Hopefully not with that same attitude necessarily, right? The negative side that goes along. But I think that's maybe more who I found myself thinking, well, okay, the artistry, is French, but there's also just incredible, yeah, that flash, that flair. So I think that maybe that's the comparison that I would go to.
Love it. Looking forward to seeing what he does, how he follows up that run in Montpellier. Mike, you're terrific. Appreciate it. Nobody better than you to have these kinds of conversations about these breakout stars on tour.
Well, Gill, I just want to say I don't watch every week. But I do watch fairly regularly. I'm a little jealous of your background there, the Syracuse Orange back there, and obviously Christopher Clary is his book is up there, presented well. I've watched your videos. I just have been building the studio right behind me, and it's black. I've got some soundproof stuff that's going up, and I want you to know the next time that you invite me back, whenever that may be, I hope to match your background shot for shot as best I can, because I think I'm lacking in that department, your flair. So I'm working on it. I want you to know that.
I love that. Like, this is what it's all about. You push me in plenty of ways. I'm happy to be the background guy. If I'm the one who's gonna bring you to the background, I'm good with that. Your personality really shines through a lot in the videos. Obviously, I'm joking about the flair, but your personality shines through, your passion shines through, and that is for I think grizzled older broadcasters like us. That is where I do learn a lot from watching your videos, is just because what you do, our mutual friend Alex Gruskin as well, but like the younger generation of tennis broadcasters, you guys are taking it to different levels with your ability to analyze the on-court stuff a little bit more and get in some depth. And I really appreciate and respect that very much, especially with how much passion shows through in those discussions. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mike. Looking forward to hearing you at your next couple stops, and I'll see you in Miami.
Sounds good, buddy.